My name is Evelyn Ellingson, Ellingson.
And can you tell me how you happened, where you're from, and how you happened to arrive in Oak Ridge during the Manhattan Project?
Well, I'm originally from Alabama, and I was working in 1943. I was working in Atlanta, Georgia, and a friend of mine from the University of Alabama, we went to school together, was working for Tennessee Eastman in Kingsport, Tennessee. And she called me long distance and she says, well, they're starting up a big project, a war project. She says, now, we can't talk about it, it's very secret, but I think you could get a job if you would come up to Kingsport to be interviewed. And she says, we'll pay your way. Well, you know, when you're young and single and somebody says, we'll pay your way, you'll go anywhere. So I said, oh, I might as well go to see Mary Elizabeth, that was her name. So I hopped on the train in Atlanta and went to Kingsport, Tennessee, and was interviewed by Mr. Ronald Flannery, who was head of the accounting department of Tennessee Eastman. And he offered me a job. And I was trying to think this morning how much I made. I think it was $135 a month. And so I told him, well, yes, I'd take the job. But I went back to Atlanta and resigned my job there. And then went to Kingsport. And we stayed in Kingsport for about 3 weeks till the group of people from Kingsport that were to operate the plant here in Oak Ridge moved from Kingsport to Oak Ridge. Now, there was no place to live in Oak Ridge. So my friend and I, we lived in Fountain City for 3 weeks and commuted from Fountain City to Oak Ridge till there was housing here. And she had a car, and so there were 3 men in the neighborhood where we were staying in Fountain City that rode with us. So in other words, we had a carpool for those 3 weeks from Fountain City to Oak Ridge. Our offices were in the old AEC building, which is where the present DOE building is. It was the first building there. And they were actually building that building around us. We had an office, but we actually didn't do any work because people were coming in all the time and we were just getting settled. Now, the first place there was to live were the dormitories. And so when the first dormitory was opened, which was the dormitory for women, and they were numbered like W1, W2, W3. And the one I lived in was W3, and it was called Beacon Hall, and it was right there on Central Avenue. We still have Central Avenue in Oak Ridge, and it was where the one skyscraper that Oak Ridge has at Jackson Plaza is now, and that's where the dormitories were for women, right in that area. Right across the street was a central cafeteria where everybody ate, and so it was the only place to eat. So you saw everybody there. What else do you want to know?
So how old were you when you arrived?
I was 24, I guess. Yeah, 24.
So what was it like to be part of this community of mostly 20-somethings?
Oh yes, oh it was delightful. There were a lot of single men, and there were lots of single women. So we had a good time, and as we remember, In the back of Central Cafeteria, there was a big room, and in that room they had a jukebox, or Nickelodeon, you know. And every night after dinner, a lot of us would go in that room and dance. And that is where I met my husband. And the men would come in there and the women would go in there and we would dance. And the men's dormitories were down sort of behind the Central Cafeteria. They were on that road back there. What is that, Tyrone Road? Well, anyway, it's back in there. And that's where my husband lived with his friend. So we had a good time, and Mary Elizabeth, the girl, my friend, and I, we roomed together, and she had a car. We went into Knoxville an awful lot because there wasn't anything, of course, in Oak Ridge, and there weren't any places to eat in Oak Ridge. So I think we frequented every restaurant in Knoxville at the time just to find some different place to eat and to have something to do. One of the main places we'd go to was for a nice dinner was Johnson Hall, and that was the dining room that was in the what was the name of the hotel?
Johnson Hotel.
Oh yeah, Andrew Johnson Hotel. How could I forget? Tennessean from East Tennessee. And it was a nice dining room where they had the white tablecloths, you know, and then they had waiters waiting on you and all of that. So for a treat, we would go to Johnson Hall for dinner. And Regus Restaurant was open at that time, and we'd go to Regus's quite a bit. And as I said, it was just a lot of young people, and we had a good time.
Any trouble with all of the security and the secrecy and living behind a fence and getting it out with their passes? And was there any? What was that like? To have to wear a badge or anything?
Well, we had to wear a badge everywhere. That really wasn't any trouble. I wasn't in any position, just to be truthful, where I handled any secret information or anything like that. I did want to say, I'm like everybody else, we had to talk about the mud. Beacon Hall was across the turnpike from where we worked, the AEC building. And we walked to work. And it was in the days of the mud. And there were days when we literally carried our shoes and walked to work barefooted. And after we got there, we would wash our feet and put our shoes on, because you wouldn't dare wear your shoes through all that mud, you know. But I was, as I said, I didn't have any problems with security or anything like that. We wore our badge everywhere and became quite accustomed to that. That didn't particularly bother us. But that was it.
Great. What are some of your fondest memories, or do you remember any funny incidences, or some little anecdote you might want to share?
No, I can't remember anything particularly. We got some funny ones on my husband, but I don't. I can't recall. I know there were some, but I can't recall anything that was particularly funny, you know.
So, how do you feel overall about your days, your years, the time spent in the Manhattan Project at Oak Ridge?
Oh, it was a wonderful experience, and I feel very fortunate that I had this opportunity and that I came here and met Bob here, and we've remained here. Had 2 daughters, and one daughter still lives here, and I have a granddaughter that's now a senior in high school here, And so Oak Ridge has just been just a marvelous place. Wonderful people and lots of interesting activities and just a nice place to live. Very happy time.
That's great.